You are not apart from the version of you who already lives the life you desire. You are woven into them cell by cell, wave by wave. The quantum field has never separated you. It's simply waiting for resonance, for the moment your energy says, I remember who I am. That signal the universe listens to isn't your wish list. It's your embodiment. It's the vibration that comes when your thoughts, emotions, and actions begin to agree. There already exists a timeline where you are living in alignment, abundant, calm, magnetic. That reality isn't an idea. It's a frequency, pulsing right beside you, waiting for you to synchronize. Through the strange intimacy of quantum entanglement, you are still connected to that version now, in this breath, not after you fix yourself, not after another course, another meditation, another healing, now. So the real question isn't if your dream exists. It's this: why haven't you tuned yourself to its signal yet? When life feels heavy or slow, when manifestation feels distant, it's not because what you want is far away. It's because your energy is still looping inside the frequency of an old self, the one that doubts, delays, overthinks. But here's the quantum truth. The instant you shift your identity, the field begins to rewrite itself around that decision. Reality doesn't wait for evidence. It mirrors your frequency the moment you broadcast something new. Most people never understand how creation truly works. They spend years trying to force reality into shape, pushing harder, chasing more, fighting against what is. Even when they awaken to spirituality, they simply trade the hustle for another kind of effort, trying to visualize their way into a new life while still being the same self who created the old one. That's why this isn't just another conversation about the law of attraction. This is a dismantling of illusion, a guide to collapsing timelines and rewriting identity at the source. Two quantum principles sit at the heart of this: entanglement and jumping. Entanglement reveals why your state shapes matter, why your inner signal organizes your outer experience, and why your subconscious patterns are not isolated. They are broadcasting through the field every second, not through your affirmations, but through the frequency of your being, the way your energy interacts with infinite potential. Quantum jumping is often misunderstood. It's not teleportation or fantasy. It's the recalibration of identity, a shift so complete that your awareness locks onto a parallel version of reality, where the version of you who already is. That outcome resides, not waiting, just vibrating, already alive in another frequency. And you've already experienced this more times than you realized. That instant when one decision changed everything, that was a jump. That flash of insight that made you see yourself differently for the first time, that was a ripple in timelines. That quiet knowing I'm meant for more, that's not your imagination, that's your future self, bleeding through the veil, sending data backward through time. Because in the quantum model, time isn't a line. It's a landscape, layered, fluid, responsive. Your future isn't waiting ahead of you. It's orbiting you right now, entangled, interactive, alive. You are in continuous dialogue with the version of yourself who already arrived. And whether you realize it or not, the feedback loop is already active. That's the code, the hidden algorithm. The field doesn't respond to how hard you work. It responds to how aligned you are. It listens for coherence, for clarity, for the exact vibration that mirrors what you claim to want, not through words, but through being. In this transmission, we're going to dismantle everything you thought you knew about manifestation and walk step by step through the most powerful principle most people overlook: how quantum entanglement makes timeline jumping not just possible, but inevitable. Once you understand the mechanics, this isn't about wishing, visualizing, or hoping your way forward. This is about identity collapse, about shifting frequency at the root, because reality isn't random. Reality is code. In the next section, I'll show you how entanglement truly works, not only in the subatomic world, but inside your own life. We'll touch the science, yes, but more importantly, we'll decode why this explains everything that's ever felt off about your reality. The version of you who already has everything. They're not separate from you. They're linked, waiting for alignment. So let's find out why you haven't made the jump yet. Quantum entanglement isn't just a clever theory. It's one of the most documented, yet least understood discoveries in modern physics. Simply put, when two particles interact, they become inseparably connected. Change one, and the other responds instantly, no matter how far apart they are. Einstein called it spooky action at a distance. But here's what almost no one explores: what this means for you, for your consciousness, and for your identity. Because if matter can behave this way, why can't you? You're not an isolated particle floating in space. You are a living, breathing field of awareness, constantly exchanging energy with the universe. And just like those particles, you've been entangled not only with other people, but with other versions of yourself. Versions that made different choices, followed intuition instead of fear, healed instead of hid, leapt instead of waited, trusted instead of doubted. You're not cut off from those versions of yourself. You're either vibrating in harmony with them or out of tune. And that resonance is what determines which version of you the field mirrors back as your lived reality. But here's the glitch in the code. Most people remain entangled with the self that's still in survival mode, still gripping the old identity, still bracing for loss, still afraid to expand, not because they consciously choose it, but because they were conditioned by repetition, by pain, by stories they never stopped replaying. And what you stay entangled with, you energize, you keep it alive, you transmit it into the quantum field until it solidifies as your world. So when someone says, "I've tried everything, manifestation doesn't work for me," it's rarely about lack of effort. The problem isn't that they're not trying, it's that the signal beneath the effort is still coming from a version of them that doubts, that hesitates, that cannot yet believe it's safe to receive. And here's where the field becomes exacting. The quantum doesn't respond to wanting. It doesn't move for pleading, or even for pretty pictures in your mind. It moves for frequency. And frequency isn't shaped by what you think about for 5 minutes. It's sculpted by what you embody every second. You are the observer, and the observer collapses the timeline. But the question that changes everything is, which version of you is doing the observing? That's the question almost no one asks. And that's why so few ever make the jump. Because jumping isn't an action. It's an upgrade of being. You can't leap into your highest reality while still operating as the self that feels unworthy of it. You can't align with expansion while making decisions rooted in fear. The field doesn't care what you say. It's responding to what you reinforce through your choices, your energy, your repetition. And sometimes, the version of you who already has what you're asking for isn't waiting. They're pulling on the line. You feel it as déjà vu, as dreams that feel more real than waking, as moments when the veil between timelines grows thin and something inside you whispers, "This is it. Step closer." You catch flashes of that other life sometimes, not because you're making it up, but because the boundaries between realities are thinning. You're not imagining it. You're bleeding into it, and it's bleeding back into you. The line of connection has already been drawn. The only question now is, how long will you keep pretending not to feel it? In the next chapter, I'll walk you through exactly how to re-entangle your field, not with wishful thoughts or mindset tricks, but through direct, deliberate identity collapse. That's how we jump. That's how we move. That's how we stop repeating and start recoding. But before we step across, pause here. If something inside you is responding to these words, it's not because you're learning. It's because you're remembering. That's what happens when entanglement activates. You don't hear something new. You recognize something ancient within you waking up. So if you've felt that quiet stirring while listening, a pulse, a pull, a yes, do one thing. Subscribe. Not for me. For you. For the version of you who's ready to come online. And in the comments, tell me, what timeline are you done replaying? Not the dream you're chasing, but the loop you're finally ready to collapse. Name it. Witness it. That awareness is the first act of release. Now are you ready to meet the method? You've been entangled with the self that hesitates, the one that delays, compromises, and doubts. But the version of you who's already made the leap, they're not out there in the distance. They're here, watching through another layer of reality. The only thing keeping you apart is the identity you keep collapsing into, the one that replays the same script, the genre frequency, the same movie. It's time to recode the observer. Every moment, you are choosing who sits behind your eyes. Most people never realize that. They think they are their thoughts, their patterns, their personality, but those are just program software. What they forget is that they are the agent. Consciousness running the system. And you can reboot anytime. This is the essence of quantum jumping, not becoming someone else, but choosing, finally, to stop observing from the self that's entangled with limitation. The jump doesn't happen through movement or effort. It happens through collapse, through the quiet rewiring of the one who's perceiving. So how do we do it? Let's start with what you don't do. You don't visualize. You don't chant. You don't close your eyes and try to escape your life. Not yet. That's what the old self does. Tries to outrun the very frequency it's meant to transcend. But quantum jumping isn't about escape. It's about reclamation. Everything begins with one thing only: awareness. Ask yourself, right now, with full honesty, who is the version of me choosing this life? What do they believe? What are they afraid of? What do they assume and is true about reality? How do they talk to themselves in silence? Feel it. You'll sense a familiar signature, a heaviness in the chest, a constriction in the throat, an ache behind the eyes. That's not random. That's the energetic residue of the current observer. It's the vibration through which you've been collapsing your world over and over again. Now comes the question that separates those who shift from those who stay looping. Am I willing to let that version of me die? Because that's what a jump really is. Not a leap across space and time, but a funeral. The sacred, conscious, deliberate death of the identity that can't walk where you're going. And most people never make it. Not because that old self is right, but because it's comfortable. Familiar pain feels safer than unfamiliar freedom. Even struggle can feel like home when you've learned how to decorate it with reasons to stay. But here you are, in this moment, with the choice in your hands. So here's the method. No secret names, no magic words, just 3 conscious recalibrations. What are they? Step 1. Witness. Sit in full presence with the version of you you're ready to release. Don't fight it. Don't shame it. Just see it. Let it speak. Let it be acknowledged. Timelines dissolve not through resistance, but through graceful recognition. Step 2. Sever. This is where the entanglement breaks. Say it out loud, or whisper it within. This is no longer who I am. I release this version. I collapse this observer. You might feel your body resist. That's normal. The old self will always beg to survive, but it only lives if you keep answering to its name. Step 3. Choose. Once the space clears, step into the new identity. Don't think it, embody it. Stand as them. Breathe as them. Decide as them. And instead of asking, what would the version of me who has it all do? Ask, what does that version no longer tolerate? Then stop tolerating it. Now. These 3 acts aren't a one-time ritual. They're a rhythm, a new operating frequency. Every day, every breath is another signal to the field. A broadcast saying, I have shifted, and the field must respond. Because in quantum law, the observer doesn't wait for proof. The observer creates it. The wave becomes form. The potential becomes presence, and reality bends, always, to the identity that dares to observe from truth. But that transformation only holds when your new identity stays consistent. And here's the beauty in that truth. The version of you who already lives the life you desire isn't a stranger or some future projection. It's a memory encoded within your own field, a frequency that never stopped existing, just waiting for you to tune back in. We'll dive soon into what happens after the jump, because the leap isn't the finish line, it's the initiation. And without integration, even the most powerful shifts can collapse under the weight of old code, trying to reinstall itself. But for now, sit with this. Which parts of me am I still allowing to decide for my life, even though I've already outgrown them? And do they still deserve a seat at the table? Take a slow breath, not just for your lungs, but for your timeline. Because if you've made it this far, you've already done something that most never dare to do. You've questioned the authority of your own past. You've disrupted the narrator. You've challenged the self that's been authoring your story. That alone begins the shift. You may not feel the full jump yet, but something's already moved. A thread loosened, a code cracked, a signal transmitted. And that's how every quantum leap begins. Not with fireworks, but with frequency. So here you are. You did it. You collapsed the outdated identity. You released the looping self. You stood even briefly inside a new observer. And in that instant, the field recalibrated. But here's what few people ever tell you. The jump is only half the story. What comes next is stabilization, the art of staying coherent inside your new frequency. Because once you rewrite your internal code, the system around you takes time to adapt. You might feel turbulence. You might feel like the air itself is rearranging. People will start reacting differently, not because of what you say, but because they can feel it. Energy speaks before language does. Your posture shifts. Your tone changes. Certain conversations won't resonate anymore. Some relationships may tremble, not out of conflict, but because they're still tuned to a signal. You no longer broadcast. And then, the strangest thing, the old timeline will start to echo back, not as failure, but as residue. As a kind of energetic static, you may feel emotional, unsteady, disoriented, not because you're falling backward, but because your nervous system is adjusting to a new vibration. That's not regression, that's recalibration. Think of it like changing the dial on a radio that's been stuck on one station for years. At first, the frequencies overlap. A little static, a little noise, ghost fragments of what used to be. In that noise, the old identity whispers, "See, nothing's changed. You're still the same." But this is the test, not of strength, but of clarity. Reality never shifts in a straight line. It shifts quantumly. The moment you embody the new signal, everything misaligned with it begins to fall away, and the parts that are leaving will always make the most noise on their way out. Discomfort doesn't mean failure. It's proof that the old program is collapsing. And this is the point where most people undo their jump. They slip back, not because it was better, but because it was familiar. So how do you stay anchored in the new timeline? You don't fight for it. You don't fake it. You embody it. Anchoring doesn't mean blind positivity or bypassing pain. It means choosing to respond as your new self before the world mirrors it back. That's coherence. When the numbers don't yet show abundance, but you speak, move, and breathe as if wealth is already your natural state. When the relationship still feels frozen, but you speak from wholeness anyway. When fear shows up at your door, and you answer, not as the wounded one, but as your highest self. Every time you think, feel, or act from that new observer, you stabilize the field a little more. Because here's the truth about the quantum realm. It doesn't respond to effort. It responds to consistency. The universe isn't testing you. It's tuning to you, and every frequency you broadcast tells it exactly who you believe yourself to be. So instead of asking, why hasn't my new reality appeared yet? Ask this, what version of me have I been energizing today? That's where the real jump happens, not during inspiration, but in the still moments of doubt, when you choose again and again to stand as the self you've already decided to become. And yes, you'll waver, you'll forget, you'll find yourself slipping back into the familiar gravity of the old self. But every time you remember, every time you pause, breathe, and return. You recalibrate the field. The signal strengthens. The static fades until what once felt like effort becomes second nature. You're not faking it until you make it. You're feeling it until you stabilize it. And there's a world of difference between the two. At some point, you'll glance around and notice the quiet miracle. The outer world rearranged itself, not because you forced it to, but because your vibration became steady. You stopped reacting from lack. You stopped arguing with limitation. You stopped giving the mic to the voice that doubted your power. And once that voice falls silent, the universe rewrites its script, not someday, instantly, because coherence commands reflection. So before we move forward, sit with this one invitation. What is one decision, one breath, one act that only the version of you in your new timeline would make today? It doesn't need to be monumental. One shift, one moment of alignment. That's all it takes to reinforce the new frequency. Because this is where the field begins to listen deeply. This is where the new world starts responding. In the next segment, we'll close the loop and explore what it truly means to live in sustained quantum awareness, where the leap is no longer an event, but a state of being, where jumping isn't something you do, it's something you are. And so it begins, not the leap that already happened, not the chaos that was only the echo, but the arrival. This is the threshold, the point where everything within you begins to slow, to reorganize, to finally settle into alignment, where the new self isn't just an idea anymore. It becomes the only version that feels real, because something remarkable happens. When you keep choosing coherence over chaos, clarity over reaction, presence over performance, the new identity stops feeling like effort. It stops feeling like pretending. And before you even realize it, you are the person you once imagined, not because you pushed, not because you willed it, but because you stopped feeding the fragments that couldn't sustain that frequency. This is true integration, where decisions grow quieter but land deeper, where every response flows from truth instead of defense, where old mental arguments simply dissolve because the voice that spoke them no longer belongs to you. Those thoughts were never permanent. They were just echoes from a field you've already outgrown, residual code from a timeline that no longer exists. And here's the beauty. It can't survive in your new vibration. This is the quantum made tangible, not abstract, not metaphorical, real, embodied. You'll feel it in your body first, how triggers lose their grip, how emotions rise and fall without hijacking your identity. You'll speak with new cadence. You'll move with new gravity, not because you're trying to act enlightened, but because pretending is no longer possible. This is the completion of the loop. The old observer retired, and the new one fully seated in command, not through luck, but through intention, through repetition, through breath, through awareness. And as that awareness anchors deeper, everything around you begins to reconfigure. People shift, opportunities realign, synchronicities multiply, not as rewards, but as reflections. Reality isn't congratulating you. It's simply mirroring back the truth of who you've become. So what comes after this? You live it. You walk through your days. You breathe differently. You wake, you feel, you respond. And when life delivers its contrast, as it always will, you ask just one question. Which version of me is being called forward right now? That's it. That's the key. That's the doorway. You were never meant to live from control. You were meant to live from signal. And that signal sharpens with every coherent choice, every grounded breath, every moment you remember who you are. Because in truth, you never jumped into a new timeline. You simply collapsed the illusion of distance between yourself and the version who was always waiting. That life was never somewhere else. That self was never unreachable. The connection was there the whole time. You just stopped tuning it out. And now, your only task is to live as though this is normal. Because when it becomes normal, it becomes real. Timelines don't shift through effort. They evolve through embodiment. Now, pause, breathe, feel what's changed inside you. Not what you hope is different, but what you already know is that knowing is your compass. That calm is your anchor. That vibration is your proof. And before we close this space, let me leave you with something to remember. If this message arrived at the exact moment you needed it, if it stirred something ancient and familiar within you, take it as a sign. Don't let algorithms decide when you remember again. Stay connected to this field, to this resonance, this rhythm, this frequency that's now alive in you. Subscribe not out of habit, but as a declaration that you are ready to remain coherent with this energy. And then, in the comments below, tell me not what you're waiting for, but what you're becoming. Describe it in a single sentence, not as a wish, but as a recognition. Let those words be your signal to the field. I'm already here. Because when you name the world you've stepped into, you activate it in others. And the field, always listening, always alive, responds in kind. This is how we rise. This is how we remember. This is how we shift together.